this material that we're going to go over is actually on the online course on the Moodle site. And the section that we're going to look at first is called What is Vedic Astrology? What is this thing that we're studying anyway? Is it fortune telling? Is it some mystical thing where we can tell, you know, if somebody likes us, or, you know, if we can understand what they're going to do tomorrow? Not really. Not really. Really, what astrology is the study of time. Sometimes you hear people say, the stars caused this, or the stars did that, or, you know, the stars made me do something, or, you know, but this is very childish, because actually the soul is the senior cause of all causes as far as what we do in this material life, or what we do with this body. The decisions that we make every day in our lives determine how we are acting. And we have the free will to either accept or reject the influences of the stars and planets. We're not machines, in other words. So if that's the case, then what is astrology really? Well, as I said, it's the study of time. The principle is that things that go on in the stars and planets, or in the worlds of the demigods, are not exactly the cause of what happens here on Earth, but they mirror the same cycles of time. If any of you watched our video on fractal time, then you know that the actual shape of time is a fractal. In other words, there's a pattern that repeats at bigger and smaller scales. And this pattern can be known. It can be understood. And according to the Vedic astrology, it repeats every so many millions of years, the same pattern. So everything that's happening now has happened in the past a long time ago, and it's going to happen again in the future a long time from now. This is all a play. Yet within that play we have decisions, we have free will, we have the ability to choose which influences we're going to accept. So the stars can show us all the details of the shape of time. They can show us how time ebbs and flows and moves in a way that is very difficult to see here on Earth. So because the study of the stars reveals patterns in time, it can show us how time is influencing us here on Earth also. And that way we can understand things that are going on here that may be hidden, that we can't see with our ordinary material senses. Therefore, astrology is called the eye of the Vedas, because it allows us to see how the Vedic philosophy is actually the truth, the absolute truth, and how those principles of absolute truth are influencing us here today in our everyday lives. So this is the knowledge that I want to share with you. The effects of the different movements of time on consciousness are well known and well understood in the Vedas. So how can we use this information to help our life today? That's the question. The point is that astrology is not a system of fortune telling. You cannot guess who's going to win the Kentucky Derby by astrology. Or which stocks are going to go up and down and stuff like that. Maybe in a very general way, but not in a specific enough way to base important decisions on that. But what astrology can show us is the opportunities that we have. I've defined astrology as a system for making educated guesses about probable patterns in the behavior of individuals and groups of human beings, based on the patterns and timing of the movements of the planets in the sky. Okay, I'll read that again. Astrology is a system for making educated guesses about probable patterns of the behavior of individuals and groups of human beings based on the patterns and timing of the movements of the planets in the sky. Okay, so it's not fortune telling, it's not magic, it's not mystical powers, although intuition does enter into the interpretation of astrology. It's really mostly mathematics. So what about the history of astrology? In ancient India, the science of astrology was very well developed. And here we see an astronomical instrument called Jantar Mantar. I'm pointing here at the scales on the side of the Jantar Mantar. These scales are capable of making astronomical measurements with great precision. And people would go up these stairs with different instruments that they would mount on these scales. And they would use them. Here's another stairs right in the center. So they would mount their different instruments on the scales that you see on the sides. And they would make astronomical observations of great precision. This instrument was used especially by the Persian rulers of India during its occupation. And they actually used these observations in the administration of the state. So astrology is not just an armchair, navel-gazing kind of novelty. It's actually a very reliable way of, as I said, making educated guesses about probable patterns of human behavior. And you can do that in your own life, or you can do it for other people, or you can even do it for groups of people. As I said, the Persian rulers used it to manage a whole nation. So it was a very practical thing, and it had a lot of different applications in life. And we may not be able to understand this statement if our only exposure to astrology is a typical Western sun sign astrology. You know, the kind you read in the Sunday paper or on different internet sites, because what they've done is very crude. They have divided all human beings into 12 types, depending on the location of their sun sign. The sun represents the ego, who you think you are. But in Vedic astrology, most of our predictions are based on the moon and the rising sign. Not who you think you are, but who you really are. So Vedic astrology can cut through the illusion of egotism to the real self. And by that we can understand who we really are and what our real purpose is in life. The real test of any astrological paradigm is when dealing with twins. Twins are born sometimes only moments apart. And yet we see that they have significant differences, even if they're identical twins, genetically identical, clones of the same egg. They often go on to have certain differences in their tastes, opinions, activities, and so on. Western astrology cannot deal with the phenomenon of twins. In fact, according to Western astrology, anyone born in the same general area of the world at the same time would have virtually the same astrological characteristics. However, Vedic astrology can tell the difference between twins, even twins born just a few minutes apart. And therefore, Vedic astrology is a much more sophisticated science because it gives us access to the higher harmonics of astrological indications. Another problem with Western astrology is that it does not use the actual physically observed positions of the stars in the sky. It uses some adjusted positions called an ayanamsha. Vedic astrology is much more scientific because it's called sidereal astrology. It uses the actual physically observed positions of the stars in the sky. Therefore, it's much more accurate. What they're doing in Western astrology is that they're trying to make up for a mistake that was made when astrology was translated from Sanskrit into Persian and Arabic about 3,000 years ago. One of the Roman emperors, Pliny the Greater, ordered that this science of astrology, this Eastern science, should be translated into Western languages. And so the different translators had different ideas about what things meant than the original Vedic source.